Joy Richu, at what point did you learn that you're a fan of Friedrich Nietzsche?
So what I've gathered, having listened to the previous conversation, is that you're quite a fan of Frederick.
I love him.
And I don't think I've had deliberate conversations about it as often as I've had them with you.
About Nietzsche?
About Nietzsche, yeah.
We've spoken about Nietzsche with you before?
I think most of our conversations, he has come into the discussion.
Hey, okay. Remind me.
Like even the first time that I think we met, because I think what you appreciate about his work is his exploration of the unconscious. And I think as artists, in whatever way we create, we're always trying to tap into that unconscious element of, like, what's the thing that's beyond perception that will make this unique. Right?
Okay. It's like Nini, you know his concept about the Ubermensch.
Tell me.
It's he has this story called Thus Spake Zarathustra, about some guy who witnesses somebody falling from a tightrope, balancing, and he goes and takes up the corpse and puts it on his shoulder, and he goes around preaching to people with the corpse on his shoulder. He wrote the book in 10 days, and it became it's one of the most important books now in European culture.
Was he successful during his lifetime?
No, he was not. He's actually, he died at 55. And he was insane for the last 10 years of his life. But people say that he was insane because of syphilis. Because syphilis.
Oh, time that used to happen often, eh?
It messed up his brain. But the weird thing about his ideas is that the things that we've been told are bad, like arrogance, he's saying it's an idea that you actually know yourself. Because, like, if you're really, really fast, like somebody like Usain Bolt, and you go and tell him, hey, you're really, really fast, and then he starts saying that, apana, I'm just trying. As you know, he's trying to be falsely humble. Nietzsche used to preach against that completely, because you should say yes.
Yes, and accept it, embrace it.
Yeah. You've mentioned before, history ya Nietzsche nafaa tukuikalia kidogo. You mentioned before something about you purpose to be yourself when you're creating your work. Like, what does that mean, and how does it feel? Like, how do you know you're actually being yourself, or you're just faking it?
Okay, so there's this thing that I have been working through recently, deliberately, but I think over the course of my career, and it's tied into that idea. And it's the idea of the ego.
Okay.
And so, for example, I find that, for example, if you were to tell Usain Bolt, oh, you're really fast, and that got to his head, and as a result, he started slacking off on his practice, or he started thinking, oh, I'm so fast, I therefore don't need to worry about anyone getting faster than me. There's a similar thing that happens in art. And so at some point, an artist gets to a point where people say they're good.
Yeah.
And at that point, it can start to feel like the perception of good is based on someone else's definition of good. And so you start to think, for example, I'm good because I made art like this, and therefore I want to continue to do art like this. But at that point, it stops becoming a true expression of self, and it becomes like a repetitive desire to succeed in the definition of what you've succeeded as before.
Yeah. And
that's why, for example, when you make art that you're thinking is good and therefore not trying to be yourself, you're repeating. There's nothing new that comes from...
It's a conveyor belt.
Yeah. Like, there's nothing new that comes from trying to be anything but yourself. I don't know if that, whenever you try to be something but yourself, you're engaging in the act of repetition. And the only originality comes when you're trying to just be yourself, because that's what hasn't been expressed before.
But it's difficult to know that you're actually there. Because my problem is not like the idea of being yourself. My problem is how do you know you are there?
How do you know the self? Is that the question?
Because there's so many voices that kind of attack a human being. There's this guy called, Floyd Wright something. This famous architect. He made the building called Falling Water. I know the Falling Water was the first building that actually inspired modern architecture, the square type of buildings. Before Kitambo's, everything was floral. So he was the first person to do it. So there was this supermarket billionaire back in the day who gave him the job to design the building. He had bought some land where there was a waterfall. So the typical thing was to build the house somewhere you could see the waterfall off the balcony or from your window. But he knew that this was part of the training he had received in school. So what he did, he ignored all the work altogether until the point that his employer called him complaining and said he will be in his studio in the next 4 hours. Then in that point, no, genius has to do what it must. So he sketched something that instead of having a view of the waterfall, incorporated the waterfall into the design. And it was his best work. So it's kind of, he found himself by almost ignoring. Kenye nataka kujua, from you in your experience, is that tangible techniques somebody can use, because he actually recommends sometimes the best thing to do is, okay, don't even touch it, achana nayo. So what would you do when the voices in your head are too strong and you know you need to create?
So there's certain techniques that have been found by different forms of artistic expression. I guess for a bit of my background, I started thinking I was going to be a writer, and that's what I did my undergrad in. And it's only when I finished my program that I was like, I don't think this is what I want to do. I want to express myself in other ways. And that's when I started doing art. But what I found is that there are very many similar practices that apply across every artistic medium, whether you're a writer, you're an artist, you're a musician. And one of the ways in which I have found, and other artists have found, one can reach that truth is writing when you're in an unconscious state. And where that happens most easily and most prevalently is either when you're just before sleeping or when you've just woken up, literally just woken up, and you haven't had the time to come into your learned awareness of your experience.
Yeah.
And so what some people do, what some writers do, for example, is you wake up and immediately you just start writing a stream of consciousness of where your thoughts are. And the value of doing something like that is the part of your mind that's like, oh, this is a really bad idea, or this is very wrong, this is immoral. That part of your brain hasn't clicked in just yet.
Yeah.
And so you have the freedom to express your thoughts without feeling of judgment. And then when you've woken up and your mind is conscious, you can look back at these ideas and select the ones which work.
Okay.
One of the pieces that you like of mine, the one of the blinking eyes, I did it by doing that, but in drawing form.
Okay.
And so what that looks like is I woke up, I was like, oh, I really like to do something like this. It makes no sense, but I'm going to draw it on this piece of paper. And I drew it, and that's exactly what it was. If I was awake, fully awake, I would have started thinking to myself, oh, this looks so bad. This doesn't look like what I've been taught it should look like. But that moment of semi-consciousness when you've just woken up is a brilliant place to find creative ideas.
Weird thing you've mentioned, Salvador Dali. Of course, unamjua, considering he's actually kind of like you in the things he's creating. Salvador Dali would make a painting of a giraffe that's on fire. It's out of place. You see his painting.
What happened?
You see his painting, and then in the middle there's a giraffe that's on fire. Okay, where hii imetoka wapi? So he used to sleep with a rubber ball he used to sleep in a chair with a rubber ball in his hand. He'd stay there with a rubber ball in his hand, just squeezing it until he fell asleep. So when he was deep asleep, he would drop the ball, and the sound of the ball bouncing would wake him up. And then he would draw whatever.
That's an amazing idea.
Whatever he had in mind, and just splash it on paper.
That's exactly what that is.
Your work is under modern art. You'd call yourself like a modern artist?
No. I think we're in a place Actually, I don't know who decides when the period is named, because right now we are in a different space that hasn't been defined.
Okay.
Simply by the presence of digital art, the presence of NFTs.
Yeah.
We're definitely in a space that maybe each artistic movement feeds off the previous one.
Yeah.
We are in an artistic movement in and of itself, and I don't know at what point we'll name it, or when does that moment happen?
Or people name it in retrospect. Like the Renaissance wasn't named when people were in the
Exactly.
Renaissance. They just it's us who called it that, looking back.
Or maybe it happened when it had become so consciously noticeable that people are actually we have moved to a different era.
Okay.
But I don't know. I think we have moved to a different era.
Yeah, there's a nini. Is shock part of your nini of your work? Because do you strive to elicit emotions of shock kidogo?
Why do you pick shock?
Because first of all, you don't use any subtle colors.
Okay.
It's always like reds and yellows. It's almost like you've walked into a fast food joint kiasi yake.
Oh, is that how you feel?
No,
Interesting.
Because nini fast food joints zukonga. Okay, it's not the best example, but fast food joints always use reds and yellows and what. But if you go into a gourmet restaurant, it's brown, green, it's an earthy color. The idea of a strong color is to shock you, but you don't stop there. All of a sudden, like there's this illustration you have of, it's almost like somebody has, is it concoct or is contort? You contort, it's somebody who has contorted himself like 3 times into a series of circles. It's almost like inakushtua kidogo. Is it an emotion you go for?
So that's the piece I was talking about just now.
The one that goes round and round.
Yeah, that's the same one with the blinking eyes.
It's not the same one.
It's not?
There's one you mentioned about 3 Kikuyu something. It had a story about Kikuyus, 3 Kikuyu stories at the bottom.
Where the person is stabbed.
Yeah, on the side. Now
that was also a morning creation.
Check it.
That was also a morning creation. And the thing is, the weird thing is, I'm aware of this, the magic of that moment. But like most things, it's such a difficult thing to do that oftentimes one won't do it. It takes a lot of dedication. For example, people who meditate, you know the benefits of meditation. Like you're aware of, oh, this will make me feel calm, this will make me feel whole.
But you skip it.
But you skip it because you're like, I could also just sleep, you know.
Okay.
But that moment is a very magical moment, especially for creatives.
And it's like a 3 a.m. moment.
It's like a 3 a.m. moment, yeah.
Yeah. Because there's a weird thing. Even Kamusheza Shai mentioned it before. It's like you get to a point where you don't need an alarm anymore. You just wake up at that time and you have to start doing this thing right now. Because nakwanga nikiona I was when on my way here today, I was thinking that why am I doing a podcast for artists?
Why are you doing a podcast?
Don't I realize? I think artists are kind of insane. They are. Because what's the utility of what you're doing? Yeah, because if you think about it, like Homo sapiens took on a 200,000 year history. And for 190,000 years, we've been cavemen. And there's cave art. Sasa, na try to imagine where, in a space where your only ambition in life is to survive. There is some guy mwenye ako huko kwa cave anapaka marangi. He's painting something on the wall that almost has no use to. The only use of that art at that time is for it to exist.
That I feel okay. My relationship with art and my view of it is very spiritual.
Okay.
I think artists, in whatever form, are here to... I think we're communicating God in different ways. And so it's not redundant. It's not it feels redundant oftentimes, and I often struggle with that. But art exists for a very, very valuable reason.
Okay.
And that's only something I've gotten to understand when I've gotten to, first off, experience really powerful work and exist in the space where I'm also creating things that, especially in that morning hour, that I don't feel come from me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And does it have to feel good that morning hour sometimes?
No, and that's what we're saying, It's in the sense that it doesn't feel good to decide I'm not going to sleep instead. That's a very hard decision. It seems so simple to think, let me just wake up. But in that moment, sleep feels a lot more alluring than waking up and doing this thing.
But again, even if you go back to bed, it's like it's half sleep because you should be doing something else.
Yeah.
Inakusumbua kidogo, because I kind of get it, because one of the mistakes I've been doing personally in my own process is that at that time I choose to sedate myself.
What do you mean by that?
I sometimes I like watching movies academically. Okay, who am I lying to? I like watching movies academically. As in, I like to watch it, and I'm not just being entertained by it. I'm trying to figure out, okay, Ujama, what was he trying? To do this and that and the other. But again, I know if I've watched it enough times, if I put it at 3 a.m., 10 minutes, I'll be asleep. I'll be sedated. So I kind of sedate myself with entertainment. And when I wake up at a more godly hour, I kind of beat myself up knowing that I took the easy route out of it, and there was something that was trying to tell. It's like, have you ever felt as if like you're a receiver?
Yes, exactly.
Like the ideas are not yours. You are just like, it's like you are an antenna. It's coming from. Have you ever how do you? Is it? Am I crazy? Am I something that happens?
No, it's actually real. And I feel like, okay, for example, this is going to sound really weird, and I'm sorry if it does.
Very good.
Yesterday, I was experiencing this art piece. It was one art piece. I don't even know who this artist is. I know I've seen their work before because I know their aesthetic. But yesterday, I saw a piece that if you were to really look at it and like in-depthly analyze it, the piece was saying something along the lines of the Chinese are going to rule the world next, and it's only after the Chinese have ruled the world that Africans will come and rule the world again. Okay. But if you look at the piece in and of itself, there is nothing like explicitly telling you these things. And that's why art is such a channel.
Okay.
And the people who either appreciate it by looking at it and really trying to understand what this artist trying to communicate through this image, it's like the scripture. It's like you can read the scripture and just take it as on surface level and be like, okay, this is saying da 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 da. Or you could look deep inside what those words actually mean and gain such valuable insights. And that's the same thing with art.
Yeah.
And especially art that is very, very successful universally. Yes, there are certain things that have contributed to that. But it's like what one of the, what Abelin was saying earlier on in her interview. Perceive this thing over and over again and try to understand what it's actually telling you. For her, she talked about the microphone and looking at the same thing every day and try to understand what is this, like what is different about it. It's the same thing with scripture, the same thing with powerful art pieces. Look at it and always try to figure out what more is there than what's on the surface. Even with films.
Even with, I can get it. I can see it. I tell you, Nini, like a funny fact.
Yeah.
When the Nazis took over France, the first people the Gestapo went after were the artists.
Exactly. There's a reason.
They didn't go after the soldiers or the politicians or
There's
the
a
leaders.
reason.
Hitler said, arrest those people in cafes. I do not want to see them there.
Why do you think that is?
Because all it will take for people not to respect Hitler is a graffiti artist brave enough to go and draw a cartoon of him on a wall, and people to pass there, see it, and laugh. He knows because Hitler himself was an artist, and I think he was a very special type of artist, because most artists are usually very chaotic. They show up for meetings late.
Wow.
You know yourselves. They have this like compulsive disorders kind of. That's part of their process that wouldn't work well if you're an accountant. Accountant is straight. This goes in here, this gets out here. Straight to the point. This is the way it works. And Hitler was like that when he was, but now on the flip side, he was also very, very organized. Very organized, because one of the things he instructed, one of the people he was very focused on in Berlin were the architects. He was striving to make Berlin look like the capital of a very powerful nation. So everything was huge, columns, space. As in unanipata. Even when he's going to be sworn in as the leader or whatever, you should go see that. Look for Times Magazine 100 greatest photos, and then look for Hitler's photo. There's no possible way that photo happened by accident. It was planned from the start, especially with those big old cameras that you have to put on a tripod and everything. As in, imagine this. Then the steps, if I could describe it, the steps up to where he's being sworn in are wide, so you can't hold the rails on the side. There are no rails. It's like steps leading up to a library, to a town hall. They are wide steps. At the sides, at the edge of the steps, going to the sides, is his army, and the first soldiers on the sides of the steps have the flags for the Nazis all the way down. So there is a system. Okay? Now, in the distance is the entire army now, but in blocks. Right? It's systemized. You can see it in the distance. And the first person you see, it's Hitler. And then his government is like 3 steps behind him in the steps. And the photo was taken from the top, looking down. As in, that's not by accident. He wanted to send out that photo to the world to show them that, like, say, I'm coming. Yani, ukiona, the way he really appreciated it. And like the problem with him now is that you can't use him for an example for anything, because like how many kids do you know who are named Adolf? If you think about it, you can't use him like hata tunaweza kansoliwa by asubuhi hiki tukitoka huko. As in tuko cancelled to be vibaya sana. And it goes back to what you're saying, like killing. I think, do you think that part of killing that ego, like that ego might as well be like the voices of other people? It's not really something from inside you. It's like, could it be?
An ego is the biggest challenge for, I guess I can speak as an artist. So the ego is the most important thing, I'll say, for an artist, because that's what I am, but I guess as a human in general, that is the most valuable thing that one can learn to either tame or destroy. And the reason is, your ego is what will tell you to stop working hard, for example. But it's also your ego that will tell you that you can't do it. Does that make sense? Like, your ego can either... Your ego will tell you... For example, Kanye West is someone I admire, at least in his what people perceive as neurotic state of saying I am a god. That is not an egotistical statement at all. That is the most pure and self-accepting statement that someone can make, even though people see it as he's such a egotistical person. Because it's your ego that tells you, your ego is separation. Your ego tells you there's them and there is us. I feel like it's such a powerful thing to be like, there is God and there is no separation between God and myself.
Yeah. Because me, the way I usually see it is like Nini. Uh, God is a pizza and I'm a slice of it. As in even the mukonga nikiona, because I if the Christians are right and everybody else is right about how everything came into existence, ndio, then it's like we've been splintered off. It's like pieces of God that have gone out there to be creators and whatnot. Sio ni ukweli? Ama mimi nimechizi.
No, it's the truth.
It's true.
It's truth.
On Instagram, nilikuwa nimecheki, I'd seen that you have like a lot of posts, and your earliest posts are very simple. Very, very simple, almost black and white. Like, what do you credit your ability to churn out a lot of work? What would you say is your nini? Is like your go-to skill for doing that? Because there's a problem of, you see somebody like, they want to be a painter, or they want to be a musician, but they've done like 3 productions in their entire life. So how do you get yourself to the point where you're consistent and you're doing your work on a regular basis and people aren't surprised to see your work posted like once in a while?
Well, I think a lot of that comes from, and it ties back into, I guess, concepts that we've explored along our conversation so far, but it ties back to the concept of not being a traditionally trained artist and the idea of ego and the fact that I never quite feel like I've arrived at a specific ideal place. And so the reason why I both produce, I try to produce a lot, and I constantly change what I make is because I haven't reached. I don't think I ever will. I don't think anyone ever does reach the place. But as soon as you settle, then you stop creating.
So it's a healthy dose of discontent.
Very healthy dose of discontent, insecurity, inadequacy, while still knowing that I do have worth in the marketplace.
You still have?
Worth in the marketplace.
Okay, hey, but it's good you've mentioned that, because I did a survey for 250 photographers. I don't know how many of them replied, but a friend of mine who's in computer science told me if you get the same result from 12 people, you don't have to survey like 100 people. Facebook just does. Facebook knows what to advertise to you by finding out 8 of your closest friends and vitu kama hizo. So it's some simple stuff. 8 data points. So I asked them like how many of them are doing photography full time, and only half of them replied that they only have photography as their job. The other ones are doing it part time. So a difficult part of being an artist is being able to support yourself with the work you do financially, and it's kind of, you're saying your worth in the market. A lot of artists, I don't think they are aware. They're so like, how do you, because it's very difficult for somebody to explain to them what is their worth in the market if they don't know where the next meal is coming from. So like in that situation, like how would you advise that artist if you are going to print it even on a billboard and tell them wake up? As in, what could it be they could work on to change that situation?
And so just to see if I've understood correctly, the situation is that someone is struggling through the day-to-day aspect of life and living, and is also wanting at the same time to be an artist. How they would navigate that.
Yeah. I think more specifically, like, how do they get their sense of worth back? Because you said you feel like you don't have worth in the market. How do they create that for themselves? Because it has to be an internal thing first, is it?
Would you mind sharing your initial thoughts on the answer to that question first?
My initial thoughts on it. I would say that artists need to learn to do the boring stuff. Because creating art is a very kind of, despite the fact that it could be kind of heavy on a person, it's also very exciting when you're going through that process of something you love. So artists tend to spend so much time making, and they don't want to do the boring stuff. Like usually their accounts are in shambles. They don't know like They don't follow up. Maybe they don't even have something like a bank account which they follow through their payments on. What else? They don't use contracts. The boring stuff you want to talk about. Because I have an experience of an artist we are working on. On a project for a script, and I mentioned the idea of figuring out how to write it so that it's sellable, first of all. And it brought a fight that we should just make it and people will come. So he didn't want to do the boring stuff like market research, first of all. Like that's one of the things I've been thinking about. And I think it's also what like Kamushes had said earlier, that listening to you get a different perspective. Listening to you is like drinking water when you didn't realize how thirsty you were.
Wow.
Unanipata. It's only when it's when you didn't know you were thirsty. Then you drank water. Then you realize, like, wow, I needed this.
Okay. This is how I feel about it. And so I think the way that we have perceived artists has really changed over time. Once upon a time, the artists were the poorest of the community. And that's why you have the notion of the starving artist mentality. And oftentimes how that fed into creation is because these people are going through so much human, emotional turmoil as a result of the economic position. They therefore create art pieces that are very like poignant and very powerful because they're able to experience these emotions that enable you to suffer in the way that some artists need to suffer in order to create, right? And so these days we think that the artists are the privileged ones, the ones who have the understanding parents or the ones who have enough money to not think about what am I going to eat.
Okay.
But if someone is an artist and the question that they have at the top of their mind is what am I going to eat, and these are the things I'm struggling through, what I'd advise them is to communicate that in your art. And I think it ties back to like what we were talking about earlier. Like there's so much like pressure to be something that you're not, and therefore even the ideas you communicate are not true to you. And so if you're in a situation where you are struggling because you don't know what you're going to eat, but you know at the heart of it that you want to be an artist, make art about that specific experience and don't try and make a painting of an elephant because we've been told African artists should make elephants and then go sell it.
Wow. It's
the idea of using your pain or your power or whatever it is that you're experiencing in life and use that as a propeller through which you create the things that you're put here to create.
So you turn the circumstance into fuel.
Turn your circumstance into fuel. And that's why, and I think it ties back to the idea of really understanding that your voice does have worth in the marketplace. Because it's the idea that, you know, who said that we only need paintings of bare-breasted African women as a representative of African art? Like we're humans with complex emotions. And so communicate that in the thing that you create.
In the thing that you create. Doesn't someone fall into the trap of like thinking that is enough?
What do you mean?
Like you just like... Because you could take that situation and it inspires the art you're doing, but you haven't solved the physical problems yet.
So the physical problem is that you don't have food to eat.
Yeah.
And so what you're asking is, how do you make money off of your art? Is that what you're asking?
Because my issue is that you could get lost in the idea of just creating it, because at that point when you're making it, you're not thinking about these other things. Okay, you've decided to use your problems as fuel, Cindy. And then after you've done that...
So one of the people who I find is an interesting creator is, I think his name is Charles, what's his last name? That's the B.
Bukowski.
Yeah.
The poet.
The poet. I find his life very interesting. He had a very, I guess the word is just interesting life, in the sense that he wanted to be a writer, but he knew that he had to pay his bills, and so he became a postman.
Yeah.
And would write in the night times and would write whenever he had free time. Okay. And I admire him because he's someone who was able to taste a bit of his success within his life, his lifetime. It took a while, but eventually he got there. And we're talking about him years and years and years after his death right now.
Yeah.
And so if you're in a situation where you need to, I guess, survive, get the thing that will enable you to survive. If it's like you get a job doing something that is just a source of income. But what one would need to understand is that in that situation, you really need to want it, because it's going to be, you're going to come home when you're tired, and you need to want to still create a thing that you think you're here for. And ultimately, I think God rewards effort, truly.
Yeah.
And he rewards not just effort, but also you sharing the effort that you've put into the thing that you're doing.
You sharing the effort.
Sharing the effort is that it's not that you just come home, do these things, and just put them in your closet, because otherwise no one will ever benefit from your exploration. So it's you come home, you work, and you share that with someone. It will take a while for you to start making money from it, but eventually you will.
Eventually you will. So you have to kind of trust the process.
You have to trust that process.
The trust inakuja na shida zake. Because we started off with talking about the voices of like other people and the voices of that ego you have to kill, kind of. So that could be one of the biggest distractions for you too. Last week tulikuwa tunaongea, how important do you think then a sense of like grandiosity and arrogance would be important in that process?
This is where Kanye West comes into a conversation again. Especially, and I think it's especially the case, I think, I speak as an African. For the longest time, we've been told Africans only do certain things. And so for you to get to a point where you're like, no, I'm actually going to be the best at this thing that I do, it takes a lot of self-belief. But also having, and that's like, self-belief is not ego.
Okay.
Those two are not the same thing. To believe in yourself is not to believe that you are better than everyone else, or that you are infallible. That's not self-belief. Self-belief is knowing and being aware of the brilliance of others while also believing in your own brilliance. But yeah, I think...
Because you have to see like, okay, the other voices are nice, but mine also has something to say.
Yours has something of worth, exactly.
Yeah, you have something to say, because, and this is an idea you have to like constantly revisit. It's just a one thing, aha moment, Oprah moment.
Are you asking?
Kind of, is it something like unafaku, like a prayer? Because if you think about it, one of the main ways for an idea to get into your head is repetition. So you have hard times today, sindio, and then you tell yourself that my voice has something of importance to say still, sindio, and then you get through that, and then once you're up one mountain, another mountain appears when you're at the top, sindio. So it kind of means you have to constantly be reminding yourself with every obstacle that comes about. But one of the things I'd say also is that I think it gets progressively easier. It's not like it gets easier. It gets easier, you get stronger.
Don't wish it was easier, wish you were stronger. It gets stronger.
You get stronger.
So it gets easier.
Manageable, like going to the gym.
I don't think so. I feel like, the sentiment of more money, more problems. That applies across the board. Because the better you and bigger you get, the more challenges come that you need to face. And so it's not that, like, how do I explain? For example, you watch Avatar, The Last Airbender.
The movie.
I watched the series for myself.
Watch the series.
Okay.
Watch series.
It's a really good animation. But it's a concept that you must get bigger the bigger your giants become. Like, you must grow with the giants that you're facing in order to be able to beat them.
Okay.
And so you can't have the same level of self-belief that needed you to get to this place. The higher you go, the more you need to overcome the doubts that you face. For example, for me, the more I explore art, the more I know how much I do not know. But if I don't go down that path, then I'll never know how much I don't know.
The rabbit hole. It's like, what's that thing they say? The greater your island of knowledge, the bigger your shore of ignorance.
Absolutely.
Inakuanga hivyo. Wow. Hey, majam. But hata sijakuuliza the first question nilikuwa nataka kuuliza about the process of creating all those things. Oh, one more thing. Nilicheki, I saw that you'd published like, was it your first NFT? I saw one. And funny enough, what I could say positively is that that's a good choice.
Okay, tell me more.
That's a good choice. I kind of sijui for some weird reason nilikuwa najua hiyo inaweza kwa cover. Inaweza kuwa something that people could go for as a product. Lakini one of the things nilikuwa nataka kuuliza, and I want to get your opinion on this. I think the people who are able to sell their work before NFTs will just translate to be the ones who are going to be selling the NFTs going forward. Is it going to be that way? There's going to be a shift? It's going to make just things like chaos.
Sorry, what do you mean?
Like the people who are just, before NFTs came along, there are other ways of like selling your art. Maybe you print it and whatnot. So I'm asking, now with this new technology, is it going to destabilize and give opportunities just to everybody? Like, because what now people are doing, are just posting, assuming that since there's somebody who sold it at 60 million, this is the new cash cow, this is the new quails. But I'm kind of thinking is that the people who are able to sell their work even before NFTs will just continue to go and be the same people who are going to most likely excel in NFTs. Do you think this could be
That's a valuable perspective. And the reason why it's valuable is because if you're already selling in the marketplace, you've learned certain things that have allowed you to know how to sell. Mm-hmm. And so it's about just applying those same principles even in this new medium. And so if the way that you've been selling, which actually I really admire that about this place, is that we come here, people get to see and interact with the art pieces and therefore want to buy them, want to engage with them. And it's just applying those same principles even in the NFT space or whatever new space comes up. It's how do we, even in Kenya, create spaces where people can come and engage with NFTs in a digital space so that you build a community that, one, is interested in NFTs and two, can engage with them regularly enough to create a market space for them. To create a market here? Am I just everywhere? I guess here, I speak about here because this is where I'm based. Okay. But in the same way that Masai Market is brilliant because you get to go there and you get to see all the things that are available to you. The more we as Kenyans can see the different NFTs that are available to us, the more we'll be open to purchasing them. It's just about populating the market. Yeah. Watch Demolition Man? I haven't. There's some reason. I actually wrote a note yesterday that there's kuna 2 movies lazima ni recommend for everybody to watch. Okay. Demolition Man and Idiocracy. Why? Because of the and try to see if that too, because Demolition Man is from 1993. Idiocracy, I think tumewatch na wewe, si ndio, na Sogalo. I think it's from 2005, and they were. Idiocracy is trying to explain how the internet is going to make people dumber and dumber going forward. And Demolition Man is trying to explain how people in the future will be so soft, even the police won't know what to do to arrest a criminal. They've been secluded from all competition. Salt has been made illegal. Sex has been made illegal without a permit from the government. Anything that's basically deemed as bad for you, anything with cholesterol is illegal. All competitive sports are illegal. There are no sports because competitive sports support the fact that somebody will win and someone will lose, and somebody will lose. So, in the future, what happens is that one of the criminals from the past who had been frozen in ice, because the prisons are in ice, you're frozen in ice, managed to escape. So the police are not capable to arrest such a person because he's aggressive and everybody is soft. So they had to go and unfreeze somebody else from the same generation. In order to get some character. To get somebody who can deal with it. Is it unaona ni kitu inaweza kuwa accurate? Do you think it's accurate with our times? Are we becoming too soft? Yeah. No. We're not. We're not. Compared to the past generations. Well,
It's a tricky one.
it is. I think things stay the same. Things stay the same.
Things stay the same.
Because at every time, like, you remember how our parents used to tell us, yeah, we used to walk to school for 10 miles, and then you're here, you're just getting soft life, you're being taken by a bus.
Yeah.
And even I'm sure their parents were like, yo, we were fighting the colonialists, and all of you are just here, you're just going to school.
Yeah.
And ones before then were like, so everyone has, like, because humans are constantly progressing.
Yeah.
There'll always be the same thing, but it stays the same. There'll always be people who have had more challenges and solved those challenges, therefore making it possible for the people after them to experience something softer.
Yeah.
But in solving those challenges, you brought up new challenges that these people need to solve through in order to make the future generations not have to experience the same pain points.
So basically, even ourselves will start complaining about the next
Yeah,
generation.
even we will
Even our
complain.
time,
Yeah.
we only had one cell phone.
We already started.
Exactly.
Born before the flash was invented.
We were born in a time where you had to put on a switch. You had to walk to a switch to turn off the light, turn on the light.
Exactly.
Backs on
Our TVs they were not holograms.
Yeah, the more things change, the more things
Stay the same.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
probably Pia was a bit too harsh on our own generation because I was falling prey to the idea that because it's true, even to survive in our society right now, despite the fact
Yeah.
that we're not fighting off beasts, is that you kind of spend 20 years in school, of which is more than any other generation in the past, and it's not easy. Thank you for that. Thank you. Yani vizuri, because I actually watched Demolition Man yesterday. I watched it as a kid, and then for some weird reason I said, wacha niwatch hii movie tena. Then nikaanza kuona it's like they were making fun of our times because they had predicted by Nini. Actually, they were not bad. By this time, we'll be having like self-driving cars and whatnot because the cars drive themselves. But the problem is that even people shaking hands, you have to stop here and then rotate your hands like this because they don't want any physical contact. So when this cop comes from the past to help them catch this guy, when people give him his hand, he anawapatia, anawahaga, anawagonga, alafu anawasukuma. So they are like, why are you so aggressive with us? Why are you trying to hurt us in some way? Ilikuwa tu kali sana. Niko na one more question for you. Nikafikiria nitakuuliza in terms interrogation style. Cartoons you watched as a kid.
Cartoons I watched as a kid
you
were
liked?
Dexter's Lab, Samurai Jack, Powerpuff Girls. I used to watch a lot of Cartoon Network, actually.
But they were ones that
Mostly
come to
Cartoon
mind.
Network.
They are all from the same artist.
Are they?
Yes.
They're from the same artist.
That's interesting. Who's the
Wow.
artist?
Gendy, Tartakovsky.
I did not know that. I need to write that down. Please pass me.
Ati Gengi?
Gendy, Tartakovsky.
Gendy Tartakovsky, the creator
write
of
that down.
Powerpuff Girls,
Dexter's Lab.
Dexter's Lab,
The other one.
Samurai
That's
Jack.
crazy. I
That's
did not know
insane.
that.
Samurai Jack na Professor Plutonium.
They look similar.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way,
By then, Samurai Jack and Professor Plutonium are the same person. Oh my God. And even Dexter,
I never
the square
noticed that
faces.
with this. Oh my god.
Even Dexter has a square face and
How
whatnot.
do you spell it? Yo,
That's amazing.
that's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yo, this is why I appreciate coming to these
There's
conversations.
an artist, hiyo ni artist lazima Google, but I'm envious of that. I wish naweza pata mtu tu hivyo. But okay, this is from the same artist, this is from the same artist, this is from, and you've just mentioned them randomly out of the blue. That's amazing. Unaenda una Google hiyo mtu the entire night.
Yeah.
You Google that person the entire night. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop. You can tell us probably if there's anything you're working on, tunaweza look forward to.
Yes, I am working on an art series about heartbreak, and I am currently developing it. So it should be out on a weekly basis over the next little while.
Prepare for some serious emotions. Joy Richu from joyrichu.com. I really appreciate the conversation. I have learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
so
having
much.
me.
Nilikuwa nimekuja hapa nikidhani najua vitu mingi. Mimi sijuangi shit. What about you? The sound guy says he doesn't know anything. We are so grateful and we'd like you back another day.
Thanks for having me.
That was Faces of Art, Joy Richu. Thank you very much.